You're watching PowerNation.
Today on Detroit Muscle, this Fox body gets the goods for building one corner carving stallion.
Hey guys, welcome to Detroit Muscle. We've got our Fox body drop top up on the lift in efforts to make some dreams happen. We're more or less tripling the power output that this thing made when it rolled off the assembly line, so to accommodate everything, well, we needed some serious parts.
And these Mustangs are basically a golden goose. Everybody and their brother makes parts for them, and they won't break the bank, and most of the time, you can do it in a weekend. And with the suspension and brakes we're gonna be throwing at our car, it ought to handle like it's on rails and stop on a dime. We're taking it over the top with this drop top Mustang. She's getting a tricked out big power small block Ford backed by a 5-speed manual. Then we will be throwing out the old suspension and brakes and replacing them with a coilover system and 4-wheel disc brakes. Now it's time for some new shoes and a set of meaty tires on some wide wheels. Carrying over the sporty look to the interior, we'll ditch the back passengers, add in a roll bar, and rock some race-ready front seats. Paying homage to the 90s, this Fox body's getting a custom wide body kit with a retro wrap for the ages. Well, they say with great power comes great responsibility. And when you're behind the steering wheel of your project, you're responsible for your own safety, your passengers, and others on the roadway. Well, the safety of this rear end is definitely a concern. It's dated and it sure has seen better days. We got these old stamped control arms, some worn out bushings, and a set of puny drum brakes. Well, I'm getting tired of all this talking, so it's time for me to get to work. Well, I brought out the axle stand so we can lower our pony car down and give her tired old legs a rest while I finish pulling out the rest of the hardware. For some of these fasteners, it's the first time they've seen a wrench since the Ford assembly line. Skip the gym today. Well, I talked earlier about this thing possibly having some bad bushings. Well, I'd say I was right. These things have probably been in here since this thing rolled off the assembly line. Well, for the Mustang rear end, we wanted something that was more or less bolt-on and still offered all the upgrades we were looking for. That's why we went with Moser Engineering's True Fox Body M88 kit. It offers a heavy-duty axle housing with all the goodies. We got adjustable upper control arm mounts, a 1350 yoke that's made out of chromoly, which we opted for, some heavy-duty braces for not only the pinion, as well as the axle tube itself. For axles, we went with a 33 spline chromoly shaft, which was a far better improvement over the 28 spline that came from the factory. Well, this kit really does have it all. From a set of control arms that retain the factory mounting location, to a sway bar that'll cut down on body roll, coilovers that you can tune for performance on the street as well as on the track. And my favorite part is going to be seeing it under the car. I got a couple of loose ends to tie up before I start the installation of the rear suspension, starting with one in the trunk. So the reason I'm in the trunk is the upper shock mount is actually located behind this panel on top of the wheel well. So our last order of business is to remove the back seat and pull up the carpet, because our anti-roll bar will actually bolt up through the floorboard here in the back. Well, the rear axle housing is pretty much ready to go under the car, but I'm going to save myself a little time and headache by going ahead and putting the upper control arms on as well as the lower shock mounts. Our lower control arms are ready to go in the car, but a good rule of thumb is to check a measurement on them. You want them to match as closely as you can to the originals that came out of the car. So we're looking for about 18 3/4 eye to eye, which is the factory measurement. We're sitting at about 18, so we'll just lengthen these ends out some, even on both sides, and we'll get it ready to go in the car. The Moser kit comes with all new grade 8 hardware and locking nylon nuts. So this upper shock mount, if you notice, is offset, and that offset needs to go towards the rear of the car. Well, I just finished installing the rear suspension in the Mustang. Got a few more things to do, like centering it and adjusting our pinion angle, but we'll get to that later on down the road. For now, let's move on to the front. They say beauty is more than skin deep, and sometimes it's hard to see. Coming up, we go from ugly to dang, that's nice.
Hey guys, welcome back. Now with the backside of our Mustang taken care of, it's time to move north. Now we're wanting to make some dramatic improvements on the front suspension of this thing, and we've done that with this new kit from Maximum Motorsports. Now one of the largest pieces that we're going to be installing is this K-member. This new piece has a lot of advantages. One, it saves us some weight. It also gives us the ability to adjust our camber and caster, which can be a problem to do if you're running a stock unit in a lowered car. There's several other components that's really gonna drive up the performance and handling of our old Ford, like the control arms, we got big sway bars, camber and caster plates, but as you guys know, before all this cool stuff can go on, we gotta get dirty.
Removing old junk parts is kind of like cleaning out your garage. It's a pain in the butt, but man, is it worth it. We'll start off by installing our K-member, which is essentially the foundation for our front suspension. And the nice thing is, it uses all the factory mounting locations, so it's a breeze to install. As we get the K-member under the car, I loosely install some bolts while Tommy preps the A-arm bushings. As I mentioned before, the K-member is the foundation, and like any good foundation, it's got to be square. So we'll lay some dots out on the floor back there, and we got our plumb bobs hanging up front. We'll measure front to back and cross to cross. Check it. If everything lines up, we'll go ahead and get it bolted all the way in.
While Peyton's centering up the K-member under the car, I'm going to build the bushings in our lower control arms. They have a urethane style bushing with a steel sleeve. Comes with this fancy grease that when you don't use it, what you'll notice is the front suspension or your bushings kind of make this awkward squeaking noise. They send 2 tubes of this stuff, and I like to use pretty much all they send with you. Using one of these little acid brushes helps it distribute that stuff around. Plus, keep this sticky stuff off your fingers. Now to install this inside bushing, you may be tempted to take the hammer and strike it, but actually just flip your control arm over, set it on the table, and drive it down. That easy.
I'm working on installing our caster and camber plates, and then we can bolt in our coilovers. This Maximum kit is a breeze to install, and for the most part, it's similar to installing factory components. Just looks and performs a whole lot better. Well, with all the handling upgrades we added, it really wasn't that bad of a job, but definitely have more to come. Up next, if you like big blocks, big power, and 4-speed, stick around. You're gonna wanna see this. Well, you've heard us talk a lot this season about the 60s muscle car era, from the emergence of the Mustang to its competitors like the Challenger and Camaro. People were digging small cars with big power. You can thank John Z. DeLorean for that. His 1964 Pontiac Tempest GTO is what's typically regarded as the spark for muscle car movement. The GTO made Americans, especially young Americans, hungry for more speed. But one car was kicking around for GM well before the GTO, the Corvette.
Ever wonder where the name Corvette comes from? Well, a Corvette is a class of lightly armored warships known for their speed and agility. And that's an accurate description for this 67 Stingray with an original 427 big block under the hood. One look at that mean Stinger and you know that this bad boy is ready for battle.
This Vette was restored by Milton Robinson, an avid car collector, and was fully restored in the mid-80s with all NOS parts, receiving near-perfect marks at Bloomington. In '67, it cost $5,604.10. Now it's worth over a couple $100,000. The 427 boasts 435 horsepower and over 460 foot-pounds of torque, burning up the road from 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds.
What does Milton love about his 67 Stingray?
70 just looks and horsepower, the mold on wheels, the side pipes, things that draw your eyes to the car. They just really improved it over the 63, 64, 5s.
Joan Steinmetz maintains and restores Milton's cars, and he gladly took this Vette out for a spin.
Go down the road, be rolling around 30, 40 miles an hour, just cruising, and decide to mat it, it's on. That's the thing about the little tires and the big motor. You can do a lot of damage and have a lot of fun.
To many, the 67 was the pinnacle of achievement for the Corvette brand. The Corvette was born in '53, the brainchild of GM's chief designer, Harley Earl. Its body panels were a composite, which was a first for an American-made car, and every Corvette since has followed that formula. People quickly fell in love with the style, but weren't so hot about that puny 150 horsepower, 6-cylinder truck engine under the hood.
By 1954, the Corvette was losing ground to Ford's 2-seater T-Bird, and only 700 were sold in 1955. The man who saved it was GM engineer Zora Arkus Duntov, who dropped in a V8 engine coupled with a 3-speed transmission. boosting the horsepower to 195. By 1957, thanks to fuel injection and a 4-speed manual transmission, the Vette was making 283 horsepower.
63 saw a complete revamp by GM designer Bill Mitchell and the introduction of the Stingray moniker. This second generation of Corvettes would last until 67. In this time span, many refinements were made, including independent rear suspension, 4-wheel disc brakes, side exhaust pipes, and the killer 427 V8 with the raised hood scoop.
Part of those 435 horses were derived from Holley's triple 2-barrel carburetor, known as the Tri-Power. Introduced in '67, this system was capable of sucking in 1,000 cubic feet of air per minute. The 427 also came with a transistorized ignition, solid lifters, high lift cam, and forged pistons, squeezing out 11-to-1 compression. The rally red exterior and the color-matched interior is a unique look.
Say I'm a red lover. I want the red with red. And that's just a better eye catcher to me.
The interior is designed to feel like a cockpit, which makes sense when you're throttling through the curves at high speed. The Stingray performs extremely well thanks to its 4-wheel independent suspension.
The earlier Corvettes had a rougher ride. These last year Stingrays were just a good, comfortable car.
67 was the end of an era for Corvettes. It was the last of the C2s, and some enthusiasts even feel it was the last of the true Corvette. Corvettes have gone through many transitions since, but one thing remains the same.
People love them everywhere you go.
Coming up, we give this Mustang a brake upgrade to stop on a dime. Well, welcome back to the shop. We're ready to put the whoa behind the go, and we are going to do that with some serious brake upgrades with parts we got from Powerstop. Well, we went with the Cobra R SN95 spindle. It uses the factory locations for the lower and upper mounting position, as well as the factory style tie rod end. Ours, we went with a bolt through style, so we had to modify the end of it a little bit, which is no big deal. And this spindle allows us to run the larger brake system that came on the Cobra Rs. Well, let's start with calipers. Now, this Mustang would have come factory with a single piston style caliper like this, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't have quite the braking force. And with us tripling the power, we need triple the braking. So with Powerstop, they sent us a powder-coated dual piston setup, which allows us to add a lot more braking power to our rotor. Now the SN95, they switched to a 2-piece configuration, meaning the wheel bearing and studs are all one combined unit and the rotor is separate. Well, the big difference between our rotors is actually size. Now the Fox body came factory with an 11-inch rotor, as the Cobra R came factory with a 13. That 2-inch difference means a lot when it comes to rotors. It's going to add a substantial amount of leverage, which is going to multiply the braking power. And this whole install is going to start with the hub bearing. So your brake rotors are actually going to be labeled either front passenger or front driver. And the reason behind that is your cooling vanes. The cooling vanes in these are actually arched, which determines which side they go on for best performance. Now, if they were straight, they could be used on either side. So the Fox body caliper actually uses a wedge and pin style system to locate it on the spindle, while the Cobra R has a 2-bolt mounting system. So a big reason to switch away from drum brakes is actually heat. As the pad presses against the drum, it causes thermal expansion, which leads to brake fade. Now our kit from Powerstop comes with a drilled and slotted rotor, which gives us our best bang for the buck.
got some pretty serious power that we're gonna be stuffing up under the hood of this Fox body Mustang, and we wanna make sure that our brakes are tip top. So we're not just stopping at the wheels, we're gonna be making some adjustments here at the master cylinder. This car's master cylinder has 2 lines coming off the front that actually feed your front 2 brakes, and then 1 line that comes out of the back on the bottom that feeds the rear. We've now converted over to disc, and this car was originally disc on the front, drum in the back, so this setup isn't gonna work for us. So we're gonna have to swap out a few parts. Our swap is super simple. It's off of a 93 Cobra, and it gives us the right kind of setup. If you'll notice, this thing only has 2 ports on it. So that means we'll have 1 for the front and 1 for the rear. Now we're also going to be installing this thing. It's an adjustable proportioning valve that we got from Summit Racing. It has 1 port in, 1 port out for your rear, and then you have 1 port in and 2 port outs for your front. It also has the knob on it. This gives you the ability to adjust your bias by simply turning it in one direction or the other. If you get in the car and you drive it down the road and hit the brakes real hard and notice that the back ones are dragging, well, crank that thing around and dial it in till you hit perfection.
Well, in order to make all these brake parts work together, we're gonna have to bend up a few lines, but that's just par for the course when you're building an old hot rod.
Yeah, he ain't wrong. But you know, guys, we've made pretty good progress for today. We've got suspension under this Fox body. We've got majority of the brakes taken care of. And with that said, buddy, I think I'm ready to take a break.
You and me both.
Well, I'm gonna let him run off. I'm gonna stay here and clean up. Who are we kidding? I'm taking a break.